Hello, dear students. My name is Masood Pervaiz. I'm Senior Lecturer for the paper Audit and Assurance at Synergic Training. I welcome you all to this very important webinar, Excelling Your Exam for the paper Audit and Assurance. So let's look at the agenda. First of all, I will be talking about a few real issues faced by students of Audit and Assurance, importance of building a knowledge base and how to apply that knowledge. I will be talking about professional skepticism, which is a key skill for an auditor. I will be highlighting few examiner reports, comments, substantive procedures and test of controls, and how you can master yourself in these two very important areas. OTQs, and at the very end, I will be discussing few exam tips. So let's talk about few real issues. Appetite for studies and feel-good factor. Students generally do not have the required appetite and they do not feel very happy while studying. So this you have to understand and you have to identify that how you can keep yourself happy. One very important issue with respect to this particular paper is lack of practical experience. Students are not working in the audit firm. They do not have the required expertise. They haven't conducted audit and the paper is very practical in nature. For that, we need to practice a lot. Not going for the kill. Failing at 47, 48, 45 means that you are not very much determined to pass the exam. Less respect for OTQs. Generally, students are of the view that they can manage OTQs, but they are very tricky and very mind-consuming. Minor areas generally are not very well prepared by students, like corporate governance, internal audit, maybe ICQs, CATs, ICEQs. So you have to take care of minor areas as well. Typing speed can be an issue as well. So let's talk about building the knowledge base. Building the knowledge base is the key to pass this exam. You have to consider this particular fact that this is the first time you are studying audit. You do not have any previous background, as in the case in audit or in the case in cost accounting. So you have to understand and you have to memorize. There are many things to memorize. Say, for instance, for example, if we are talking about engagement letter. So you might have to memorize what are certain terms of engagement letter. If we are talking about, say, for instance, audit risk, you should memorize what is audit risk, what are certain components of audit risk, and what are certain definitions of those components. What are certain audit sampling methods? What are certain procedures to evaluate the appropriateness of the going concern assumption? What are certain elements of the control environment? And there are many other examples as well. So my first very important message to all of you is you have to invest in building a good knowledge base. And the second part is application of knowledge. Again, if you are not working in the audit firm, definitely you will struggle because you cannot relate or you are unable to relate knowledge with applying on a particular scenario. For that, you need extensive practice of different past papers, questions again and again. Put yourself in a particular scenario, try to attempt it. Building a knowledge base, first step. Application is through attempting more questions again, and again. Skepticism. Auditors should have a very good questioning mind, critical assessment. Auditor does not believe in unanswered honesty. So what I have seen in my career, that students, as they are not working, majority of them are not working, or a significant portion of students are not working in the audit firm. So they do not have the required mindset of an auditor, a questioning mindset, which is required to identify certain areas, especially risk areas, inherent risk areas, questioning mind, critical assessment, that how they can achieve that particular evidence. So I think this is, again, if you're not working in the firm, my special emphasis is that you should attempt as many questions as possible to build that mindset which is required for an auditor. Now let's look at few of the examiner reports. Just for a quick reference, section A will be having 3 OT cases, 5 OT questions. An examiner is going to cover all the syllabus areas in this OTQ areas, and it will be a blend of knowledge and application. So you have to take care of it. Section B will be having 3 constructed response questions, 30, 20, and 20. And again, examiner is expecting a detailed understanding and application of audit and assurance areas in much more detail. One very important comment by your examiner is about understanding the purpose of a specific audit procedure. Like if there is a procedure, you should be in a position to identify that this procedure is addressing which assertion. I will be talking about assertion laterly when we talk about substantive. So this is a very important observation or highlight from the examiner report is that students, they generally do not understand that why I am applying this particular procedure. Good understanding of the audit assertions. There are separate assertions for classes of transactions, account balances, and presentation and disclosures. So you should be knowing what is meant by occurrence. You should be knowing what is meant by completeness, what is meant by cutoff. If you do not understand what is the meaning of occurrence with respect to sales or occurrence with respect to purchases or completeness with respect to non-current assets, how come you can relate procedures with that particular assertion? Whenever you are studying, you should be knowing that this particular procedure is addressing which assertion. So you should have a clear understanding of audit assertions. One very important aspect is the difference between test of controls and substantive. I think all of you should be knowing that we apply substantive procedures to detect material misstatement in classes of transaction and account balances. And we apply test of controls to check the operating effectiveness of controls. There are controls and we are verifying those controls. You know, if you are having a good understanding of test of controls, rather controls, testing those controls is not a difficult task. But if you do not understand systems, subsystems, their risks, their control objectives, many students confuse control objectives with controls. So again, this is a very important message from your examiner. Requirement verbs, define, do not explain in that case. If you explain, you will lose marks. Identify and explain. If you identify, do not explain, you will not get marks. So you have to respect requirement verbs. And in many cases, there are more than one requirement verbs in a particular question. So you have to take care of all the requirement verbs to gain maximum marks. Moving forward, regarding controls, your examiner is of the view, I might ask question on controls. What are key controls? Examiner might ask question on how to test those controls. And one very important area is if you are given with a scenario and you are asked with deficiencies, you have to identify deficiencies. You have to look for the implications of that particular deficiency and the recommendation. So while recommending, you are supposed to be very assertive. You are supposed to be very clear. And in recommendation, you should not be copying the deficiency, or you should not be talking about objective. Objective is not your recommendation. So you should differentiate between recommendation and objective. Recommendation, like examiner already discussed about it, recommendation clearly address the specific control deficiencies identified and a practical suggestion. Many candidates often just repeat the deficiency, and to obtain the recommendation marks, much more detail is required. So these are few key points of your examiner reports, which you should be taking care of. Keeping in view the audit report, examiner is of the view candidates should not just rewrite the fact. You should be able to, if you have identified a conflict with management, if you have identified a scope limitation, you must be able to discuss about either it is material, it is not material, either it is material and pervasive. And I believe that everyone is knowing that if a conflict is material, it has separate implication. If it is material and pervasive, definitely you need to have an adverse opinion. Same the case with scope limitation. If it is material, you have to qualify. Material and pervasive, you have to go for a disclaimer of opinion. And then you should be knowing where to have an emphasis of matter and where to have an other matter paragraph. So the impact is very important. If management agrees, what will be the impact? If they do not agree, definitely implications will be different. Auditor report, examiner is of the view that auditor report is a core area of your syllabus. Knowledge of the standards in this area is imperative, important, and candidate must ensure that they are familiar with and use the terminologies as set out in the ISS. You know, using of golden words is very important, like sufficient, appropriate audit evidence. Okay, so I hope you understand that you should be working on auditor's report as well. Now let's talk about substantive procedures in detail. As I mentioned earlier, for substantive procedure, you should have a detailed understanding of assertion. What are certain assertions? What is meant by occurrence? If I give you an example, say for instance, there's a question on occurrence, how to verify occurrence with respect to sales. So occurrence with respect to sale means that all sale invoices, sales or transaction and events related to sales which have recorded have occurred or not. Occurred or not, and leads to the entity. So your assertion is your objective as well. Say for instance, in occurrence, you are supposed to verify that whatever sales which management have recorded in the financial statements actually occurred or not. And if that particular sale is there, does it pertains to the entity? So definitely your flow of audit procedures will be from financial statements to the initial documents, because you are verifying occurrence. But on the contrary, if you are verifying completeness of sales, in that particular case, your objective is to verify that all sales that should have been recorded or not. So in that particular case, your flow of procedures should be from initial documents to financial statements. So if you do not understand procedures like this, that in occurrence, what I am trying to achieve, or in completeness, what I am trying to achieve, you will not be able to understand the procedure. You might memorize 3, 4, 5, 10 procedures, which might help you up to a certain extent, but definitely you are not able to pass the exam if you do not have a complete understanding of the procedures assertion-wise. One very important factor is there are many questions in the exam which require that to check overstatement, what will be your procedures, or to check understatement, what will be your procedure. If you talk about overstatement of non-current assets, say for instance. So what we are looking for assets which are not the assets, but they are recorded in the financial statements. In that particular case, your flow might be from the financial statements to the source document. And if you are checking understatement of non-current assets, your flow might be entirely different, maybe from initial documents to the financial statements. The point I am emphasizing it, if you do not understand what is that particular assertion with respect to a particular area, so you will not be able to write procedures effectively. In that particular case, you have to concentrate on assertion and what are certain procedures with respect to that particular assertion. I think I made my point very clear. If you talk about test of controls, again, there are three different categories of questions which can be asked in test of controls. Like you might be asked to suggest controls. You might be asked to test those controls, and you might be given with the scenario in which you have to identify a deficiency, and you have to talk about implications, and you have to talk about, or you have to recommend a control. There are 5 systems in your syllabus. So my first recommendation is you should be understanding the systems and specifically subsystems. Every system is having certain subsystems. Like if you talk about purchase, if you talk about sale, cash, there are certain subsystems. You should be knowing about what are certain subsystems and what are certain risks related to those subsystems. And if you understand system, subsystem, their risks, you will be able to identify certain controls. They are normally, majority of the controls are preventive in nature. There are 4 or 5 preventive controls which are generic, which can be used in different systems like authorization, like segregation, like rotation, like pre-numbering. So these are standardized preventive measures which invariably can be used in different systems. Now, if you are given with a question in which you have to identify a deficiency, let me give you a small tip. First of all, you have to identify the deficiency. So normally we use the word not. All sale invoices are not authorized. So normally you find the word not. Second, you might be asked to talk about the implications. In implication, we use the word there is a possibility. There is a possibility. Might be the case because we are talking about implication, possible effects on the of that particular deficiency. And the third thing is you have to give recommendation. While giving recommendations, we are supposed to be certain, like should all sale invoices should be authorized by the sales director. From the examiner comments, one very important thing which I have identified for you guys is the differentiation between an objective and control. Like if you said ensure, say for instance, you said ensure that holiday request forms are authorized. It's an objective. How to ensure? It's a control. So it's again a very common mistake by the students that they are unable to differentiate between an objective and a control. Test of controls, in test of controls, you have to test those controls by what you can say, observation is one of the tool available. Inspection, you can inspect, but definitely if you are applying test of controls, you will not be focusing on substantive procedures, rather analytical procedures. So analytical procedures are more diverted towards substantive procedures. Recalculation is more diverted towards substantive procedures. Okay, but inspection is used both ways in substantive procedures as well and in test of control. So normally students get confused between what tool we used in substantive procedures and what tool we can use in test of controls. Okay. Now let's talk about OTQs. Guesswork will not work in OTQs. I hope by this time you guys have gone through OTQs in detail. So do not try to have a hit and try scenario. You must be able to explain why it is correct and why the option is wrong. The best way to prepare for OTQs is you should, if it is correct, you should be knowing why it is correct. And if it is wrong, you should be knowing why it is wrong. I strongly recommend that you should go through exam kits with solutions. There are many questions available with many publishers, and you should try to attempt all the questions. Requirement verb, I have already mentioned, least, most, which are a little confusing. So you have to concentrate on requirement verb. What are test of control and substantive procedures? Again, like I think we are very clear of the fact that substantive procedures are applied to detect misstatements, which are material. And test of controls we apply to check the operating effectiveness of controls. Again, So you should be knowing the difference between test of controls and substantive procedures. And one very important factor is you must be told by your tutors as well. If you are verifying an assertion, there is a possibility that one particular assertion, you can achieve a certain evidence regarding a certain assertion, either by applying test of controls or either by applying substantive or both. Then I have already identified or overemphasized on the fact that procedures should be assertion specific. You should be able to link that. If I am verifying occurrence, what should be my flow of procedures? If I am verifying existence, what will be my flow of procedures? If I am verifying completeness, cutoff. So I think the flow of the procedure, either you should be going from the initial document to the financial statements or from the ledgers to the initial document. This is very, very important. And with respect to test of controls, definitely when you draw the complete system, like there's a transaction trail, say for instance, you said there is a sale order, then there's a credit control department, then there is good dispatch note, then invoice. So you can apply a test of controls while staying at that on that transaction trail. You can identify, or rather you can select few sale orders and you can verify those sale orders with sale invoices. But you should be knowing that why you are verifying sale orders with sale invoices, or if you are verifying dispatch notes with sale invoices, you should be knowing the reason. So as I mentioned earlier, test of controls are, I believe, most easiest of the all. If you identify what is the transaction trail, what are certain documents, what are certain controls, and then you have to verify those controls. Safeguards for ethical threats, which is appropriate or not. This is a very common question. You are given with certain threats and you are given with certain safeguards, and you have to choose the most appropriate one. You should be knowing what is the most appropriate. This you can achieve by practicing more. Flowchart, ICQs, ICEQs, few questions in the past have come in this area as well. My strong recommendations is OTQs should be attempted first. You need a very fresh mind, more energy to deal with OTQs. So once you go to section B, it will be tough to go to effectively attempt section A. Read the requirement work carefully. I have already discussed that. At the end, let's talk about a few exam tips. I strongly recommend to have a time-bound practice sessions. Normally at the end, students, they linger on with the books for a longer period. It's good, but you should have a timetable. If you are planning a session for 3 hours, you should have proper targets for that. And this is my strong recommendation, that you should have a time-bound practice sessions. Then processing speed is important. You know, in an exam, you might experience that in first 30 minutes, you are having a different processing speed than the midstream and then at the end stream. So it is again recommended to achieve a constant processing speed for your exam. For that, you have to sit at a particular time. If maybe 3 hour sessions, they are mostly recommended, maybe 4 hour sessions, maybe 3.5 hour sessions, and you should keep on giving yourself certain tasks in that particular time period to enhance your speed. Nervous tension is very, very, very common. You know, even if you are 60 years of age, you are appearing in an exam, you will feel or face nervous tension. How to overcome? Definitely breathing exercises, maybe keeping yourself properly hydrated, exercise, proper sleep, and definitely you should be very well prepared for the exam. If you are very well prepared for the exam, definitely it will keep your nervous tension in check. Stay happy and aggressive. I overemphasize on this. How to stay happy? You should be knowing what are your key interests. So you should try to stay happy, aggressive, and build a good appetite for studies. When I say aggressive, that means you should be taking the paper head on. I think this is the time to perform. This is not the time to get panic. Strong knowledge base is the key. I've already started my presentation with this, that knowledge base is the key. You have to rote learn certain areas as well. I have mentioned at the start. So Building a strong knowledge base with understanding is very, very important. Do write on daily basis. It is medically proven that if you write on daily basis, it increase your concentration and confidence, and both these things are very much required to pass the exam. So these are few exam tips from my side. Thank you very much for watching this video of mine. Thanks to the Synergic team supporting me to record this session. I can be reached at on these email addresses and telephone numbers. My best wishes for all of you for this exam. Stay happy, stay safe. Good luck from my side.